This video was brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. John Carpenter's The Thing might be one of the greatest movies of all time. The film, based on the John W. Campbell Jr. novel, Who Goes There, tells the story of a research team in Antarctica who are hunted by a shape-shifting alien that assumes the appearance of its victims. Although it was hated by critics and bombed at the box office when it was first released, it has since then gained widespread acclaim and has cemented itself in film history. Its impact on the horror genre, special effects, and filmmaking is so vast, it's hard to put into words. I love 1982's The Thing so much, and if you haven't seen it, you need to shut off this video right now and go watch it. Or if you have seen it, shut this video off right now and go rewatch it. Because today, we aren't covering 1982's The Thing. We are covering 2011's The Thing. 2011's The Thing prequel does share some qualities with the original, those being that it was hated by critics on its release and was a box office bomb. However, the 2011 film has not been fondly remembered like the original, and is to this day still regarded as a bad movie. But what about it is so bad? And what went wrong during production which resulted in such a poor final product? These are questions I'm going to attempt to answer in this video, so join me as we take another look at 2011's The Thing. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Have you been looking to launch your own professional website, online store, portfolio, or blog? Well, look no further than Squarespace for all your website needs. Creativity is at your fingertips with Squarespace's design intelligence. From customizable templates to pre-built layouts, you can craft a more personalized website tailored to you and your brand's specific needs. One of my favorite features is the built-in mobile website. Every design automatically includes a unique mobile experience that matches the overall style of your website, so your content will look great on any device. So go to squarespace.com to get a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/IsenhartProductions to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Once again, thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now back to The Thing.
You've got to be real careful when you revisit material that has been loved. Only do it if there's something new to be done with it.
Just as a warning, if you are sensitive to blood, guts, and gore, you might not want to watch this video, as there will be many clips from the movies. In order to find out what went wrong with this film, we need to take it back to the year 2004. Zack Snyder's remake of George Romero's Dawn of the Dead had just been released by Universal Pictures and was a hit at the box office. Inspired by the success of the remake, two producers at Universal, Mark Abraham and Eric Newman, took a look at their movie catalog to see what other classic horror movie properties they could remake. That's when Abraham and Newman landed on John Carpenter's iconic 1982 film, The Thing. However, they decided not to remake this one, and rather to create a prequel, which would focus on the Norwegian group we see briefly at the beginning of the 1982 film. They landed on a prequel since the original is a perfect film, and as they stated, it would be like painting a mustache on the Mona Lisa. Around this time is when Dutch filmmaker Matthijs van Heyningen Jr. entered the picture. Heyningen was initially working on a sequel to Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead film, titled Army of the Dead, which was actually going to be his feature film debut. However, this film was canceled just 3 months before production was set to start, and Heyningen had to start all over from ground zero on a new project. He began thinking of other classic horror movie franchises that he might want to work on, and he landed on The Thing. So he called up his agent and asked if any studio was doing anything with that material. He just happened to ask about this property at the same time that Mark Abraham and Eric Newman were trying to get their The Thing movie off the ground. So in 2009, the project was officially announced, with Matthijs van Heyningen Jr. as the director, and a script being written by Ronald D. Moore, who had a huge background in the science fiction genre. It seemed like a perfect match, but evidently the studio wasn't happy with Moore's script. Reportedly, in Moore's script, the audience knew who the Thing was for a majority of the movie, which the studio and Heyningen felt was the wrong approach to the story. Eric Heiserer was brought on to do a full rewrite, who would later go on to be nominated for an Oscar for Arrival just a few years later. Scott Frank would also be brought on to touch up the script in regards to some dialogue, but he doesn't have credit on the final product. Casting went underway in early 2010, with Joel Edgerton and Mary Elizabeth Winstead set to play the leads. Heyningen cited Ripley from the Alien franchise as an influence on Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character of Kate. In addition to these Australian and American movie stars, many Norwegian and Danish actors were cast to fill out the rest of the camp. By this time in production, it seemed like everything was going all right. There weren't any major flags popping up which would signal the mess of a movie that would come. Well, actually, there was one red flag that popped up, that being the title of the movie. The filmmakers and studio heads decided to give the prequel the exact same title as the original. Although I understand why they did this, personally I think this was a very poor idea which had detrimental ripple effects on the project. On one hand, you get that brand recognition that the first film has, but then you are lending the film to be directly compared to the original. I think this led to the reviews being a lot harsher than they would have been if the movie was given a different title altogether. Additionally, it gives the impression that the 2011 film would be a remake, when that's not the case. It is a prequel and is technically a different story. The film officially went into production on March 22nd of 2010, shooting primarily in Pinewood, Toronto studios. Despite what you see in the final product, the filmmakers actually used practical effects for all the shots with the Thing on set. Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr. of Amalgamated Dynamics designed all the different forms that the Thing takes on during the film, which is the team behind all the alien bugs you see in the film Starship Troopers, the Graboids in Tremors, and various aliens throughout the Aliens franchise. I mean, these guys are the real deal. The effects team decided to use cable-operated animatronics to puppet the Thing. Here's a quote from Gillis. "We've opted to use cables as opposed to going into more complex hydraulics because there is an organic feel to a performer pushing and pulling, and that kind of immediate feedback is satisfying. These puppets aren't so huge that they require massive power like the stuff we did on Starship Troopers or something, so that's why we're going with cables." The original plan was to primarily feature these practical effects and then embellish them and expand them with digital effects in post-production. So, they shot this entire film with all the practical effects. And everyone was really excited about this decision. In many interviews with the cast and crew during the film's production, they all raved about how cool the practical effects were. I'll link the behind the scenes in the description. I highly recommend checking it out because it's a great watch. It really sucks what happened to this film in the end, because in this BTS footage you can see how much everyone cared about this project, and how much work went into it that was just painted over in the end. Speaking of which, that leads into what went wrong behind this film.
When I first got the script, I was a little bit frightened, because I was like, this is a lot to live up to.
As far as I could tell, by the time the film hit post-production, nothing too big had gone wrong. A rough cut of the film was assembled, and test screenings went underway, both with focus groups and with studio executives at Universal. And this is where the problems start. Reactions from these test screenings were interpreted as negative. Additionally, the studio didn't like the slow boil pace of the movie, so many moments of character development were either shortened or cut altogether, so that the film got to the monster and the action quicker. Here's a quote from screenwriter Eric Isenhart from an interview on Bloody Disgusting. "In terms of it being a slow boil, another victim of the test screening process was the character introductions. I think again it's a case of either for better or for worse. Either audiences are going to really get into this movie or feel that something is missing. So when we lose those moments, we lose good character building stuff that glues the scenes together. Right now, we get to the monster as fast as possible. And since the test screenings proved that's what those audiences wanted, I can say yay or nay to it. But it does feel like there are pieces of it missing." You can find a lot of these deleted scenes on YouTube, and I highly recommend checking them out, because just as Heiserer suggests, they help fill in the missing holes in the theatrical cut of the movie. I'll link them in the description as well. There was another big piece of feedback from these test screenings which would have the biggest effect on the finished product. That being the use of practical effects in the film made it feel too much like an 80s movie. Now, I couldn't find out if this piece of feedback came from the focus groups or the studio execs, but either way, it is such a baffling complaint to have. These people were upset that a prequel to The Thing looked too much like The Thing. I'm sorry, but I just have to reiterate how stupid this decision was. You have a film which is known for its practical effects and how influential its practical effects are, and then you criticize that the filmmakers used practical effects. It's just so upsetting. In a few interviews while promoting the film, Heineken said that the practical effects didn't really hold up. He did say this in an interview with Sci-Fi in 2023. "I know this is a debated topic, but looking back, we were caught in a cross zone where animatronics were old-fashioned and the CGI wasn't good enough. We made the wrong decision to do it in post-production, making the monster design in the computer. I regret that now." Even though Heineken uses the word we, personally, I think this was mostly the studio that made this decision and forced him to comply. This was his directorial debut for a feature film, which means it would be easier for the studio to bend him to their whims, since he doesn't have the status an established director would have where he could tell the studio no. The decision was made to cover up all these practical effects, basically tracing over everything that was shot and replacing it with CGI. And not even good CGI either. Bad CGI. Like very bad. But I don't blame the visual effects workers. It's obvious that the effects were rushed out by the studio at the last minute. Allegedly, Universal was tweaking the CGI up to 24 hours before the film debuted in theaters. In addition to the CGI, Universal also sent the production team back out for some mandated reshoots. These studio-mandated reshoots caused Universal to pull the film from its initial release date of April 11th and push it to October 14th instead. Heineken revealed in 2012 on his Facebook page that the entire ending of the movie was changed during these reshoots. The original ending would reveal that the Thing was a specimen that another group of aliens collected. However, during transportation, the Thing escaped and killed all the other aliens on the ship. The alien who was piloting the ship would then kill itself and crash the ship in an effort to kill the Thing, which obviously didn't work. In this original version, Kate discovers the alien pilot dead, and then the Thing confronts Kate in the form of the alien pilot, and she blows it up in that form. However, Universal didn't like this backstory with the aliens, so it was cut out, and we got the weird Tetris thing where the pilot animatronic originally was. So the original version of this movie has been referred to as the pilot version, and the new cut of the film has been referred to as the Tetris version. Here's a quote from Heineken's Facebook in regards to the pilot version. "Studio didn't like this. Too complicated, and to some degree, they were right. So we had to lose the backstory and replace the pilot with the Tetris. They thought that the pilot wasn't scary enough, so we created the Sander thing at the last minute, which shows unfortunately. What had to be done was showing the slaughterfest while Kate was going through the ship, seeing multiple pilot aliens being dead, half transformed, burned. Something terrible had happened in the ship. I liked that idea because it would be the Norwegian camp in space. Kate sees the pod room and one pod being broken, giving her clues what happened. What didn't work was that she wanted to find Sander and stop the ship from taking off, and still solve the mystery in the ship. These two energies were in conflict. It's hard to say which ending is the better one. While I do understand the criticisms that the pilot ending is a bit complicated, I personally like the original backstory more, and the idea that these other aliens also fell victim to the Thing. But I guess it's a matter of opinion. So just as a recap, there are two distinct versions of this movie. We have the pilot version, which includes the original ending with the other aliens, has practical effects, and the pace is more of a slow boil. And then we have the Tetris version, which has the Sander thing and no alien backstory, CGI which covers the practical effects, and a quicker pace. The Tetris version is the one that went out to theaters. But was it the right call?
John Carpenter considers it the best film he ever made. When I called him to tell him about this, he goes, "Hey, good luck, man."
The Thing debuted at number 3 in the box office right behind Real Steel and Footloose, with an opening weekend gross of $8 million. In the United States, it went on to only make $16 million, and overseas it raked in $14 million for a total worldwide gross of $31 million. And against a production budget of $38 million, not including marketing or distribution, that meant this film was a box office bomb. Not only was it a commercial flop, but it also missed with critics, fans, and general audiences. The film currently holds a 6.2 out of 10 on IMDb, a 34% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 2.7 out of 5 on Letterboxd. As to be expected, one of the biggest points of criticism was the terrible CGI, and that's pretty much been this movie's legacy ever since. Reportedly, Heineken had such a bad experience from making the film that he didn't make another feature film for 9 years, mostly doing commercial work, which is very unfortunate. I personally really enjoyed 2011's The Thing, and even though it's nowhere near the 1982 film, I think it gets too much hate. But that's just me. There were ideas for a sequel being tossed around. However, after the film failed to connect with audiences and lost millions of dollars, these sequel hopes were quickly forgotten about. In an interview with Sci-Fi, Heineken said this: "We fantasized about a sequel. Kate would escape and would be picked up at sea and tries to warn the world at an oil platform near the South Pole. The monster would break loose on the rig. I like the oil rig mayhem idea." It's probably a good thing that the sequel didn't happen, because then it would have nullified the ending of the original film. Even though I've been defending Heineken this entire video, I admit this was a bad idea. In 2015, an online petition was created to release the pilot version of the movie, which garnered 2,000 signatures. However, it was closed due to a lack of followers. 5 years later, in 2020, the hashtags release the pilot version and release the Studio ADI cut were started as a response to Zack Snyder's Justice League, and behind the scenes footage of the thing being posted to YouTube. I really hope someday we will be able to see this version of the film. I have a feeling this pilot version was much better than the one we got, but who knows. However, it sounds like we may be getting a reboot of the property after all, as it was reported in January of 2020 that Universal and Blumhouse were teaming up to create another adaptation of John W. Campbell Jr.'s novel, featuring new material from the original manuscript that had been lost for decades and that was just recently discovered. Although there hasn't been any updates on this project since its initial announcement in 2020, so it's hard to tell if this film will ever materialize.
Okay? Yeah. It was a nice get there.
The whole story behind 2011's The Thing is just upsetting. This movie had potential to be a lot better than it ended up being, but it was pulled apart in the editing room. From keeping the same name as the original film, to removing character development, to changing the ending, to taking out practical effects, it seemed like the wrong decision was made at every move. And these decisions led to the film being torn apart by critics and losing millions of dollars at the box office. It's all just upsetting. But what are your thoughts on 2011's The Thing? Have you seen it? Did you like it? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This has been Tom from Isenhart Productions, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week. Here's a clue for next week's video.
The moon falling, and it looks scary.